Peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 2: Phi as Pure Potential. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, Phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When Phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once: time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and the motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are in Episode 8, the pure abstract language. In Part 1, we stepped back from our physical universe to ask, what is the holophase language in itself, before it writes any world? We entered the realm of pure possibility, where phi exists not as something physical, but as a mathematical structure, a function from points to values on a circle. We compared this to studying music theory rather than listening to music, understanding the rules that make symphonies possible, not just appreciating particular symphonies. Today, in Part 2, we go deeper into this abstract realm. We explore phi not as something that does, but as something that can. Not as a story being told, but as the capacity to tell stories. Today, we meet phi as pure potential. Imagine walking into a library before it opens. The shelves are filled with blank pages. Not empty shelves, but shelves full of paper that could hold any story, but do not yet. The paper has the capacity for meaning. It can absorb ink, hold letters, form words. But right now, it is just potential. This is phi in its pure abstract form. It is not yet telling any story. It is the blank page of reality. Or think of a musical instrument before anyone plays it. A piano sits silent in a room. Every key has the potential to sound a note, to join with other notes to form chords and melodies. But until someone touches the keys, it is just potential. The instrument has the capacity for music, but not yet the music itself. Phi is like that silent instrument. It has the capacity to express every possible pattern, every rhythm, every harmony of reality. But in its pure form, it is not expressing anything yet. Here is the crucial distinction we must understand: capacity for meaning versus actual meaning. The English alphabet has 26 letters. Those letters have the capacity to form all English literature: Shakespeare's plays, scientific papers, love letters, legal documents. But the letters themselves are not literature. A is not a story. B is not a poem. They are capacities for meaning. Phi is like the entire alphabet of reality. It is the silent alphabet ready to mean something, but not yet speaking. Let me make this more concrete with an analogy that will carry us through this entire exploration. Imagine you have a perfectly smooth, perfectly white sheet of paper stretching infinitely in all directions. This paper is phi. It has no marks, no writing, no patterns. Just pure, uniform whiteness. Now, what can you do with this paper? You can draw on it. You can make marks. Where you make a mark, the whiteness changes. You create differences: dark against light, ink against paper. The first mark you make creates the first derivative. You have changed phi from uniform to varied. But here is the beautiful part. The paper does not care where you start drawing. If you shift your entire drawing a little to the right, it is essentially the same drawing. The relationships between marks matter, not their absolute position on the paper. This is what we mean by phi as pure potential. The paper is the capacity for drawings. The whiteness is the uniform state from which all variations emerge. The act of drawing creates differences, and those differences are what carry meaning. In our physical universe, when phi varies, we get omega, the time variation, k, the space variation, and v, the motion that links them. But in the abstract language, these are just ways the blank page can be marked. Omega is like drawing the changes as you move in a sequence-like direction. K is like drawing the changes as you move in a coexistence-like direction. V is like the pattern that emerges when you consider both directions together. But the paper itself, phi, remains the silent substrate, the potential for all drawings. In the metaphor of phi as language, what role does pure potential play? It is the substrate, the material on which writing happens. It is not the ink that is the variations. It is not the pen that is the process of changing. It is the paper. Or, in digital terms, phi is the blank memory in a computer. It has the capacity to store any program, any data, any image. But until something is written to it, it is just potential storage. This is a crucial shift in perspective from how we usually think about physics. We are accustomed to thinking about what exists: particles, fields, forces. Here we are thinking about what can exist, the space of all possible patterns. Phi, as pure potential, is the space of all possible stories that reality could tell. Our particular universe tells one specific story, or a collection of related stories. But phi encompasses all stories that could be told within its grammatical rules. Scientifically, what does phi as pure potential mean? It means this. Phi defines the possibility space for differences. Think of temperature. What matters physically is never absolute temperature, like it is 300 Kelvin, but temperature differences, like it is 10 degrees warmer here than there. Temperature differences drive heat flow, create weather patterns, and power engines. Phi is similar but more fundamental. Phi values themselves are meaningless in isolation. Only differences in phi matter. Only how phi changes creates observable effects. In the abstract language, this becomes: phi establishes the framework within which change can be measured. It is not that phi is nothing. It is that phi is the reference state from which all variations are defined. Here's another analogy. Think of altitude. The concept of height only makes sense relative to some reference: sea level, ground level, something. Phi is like establishing that there is a concept of height, that things can be higher or lower before anything actually has a particular height. Even as pure potential, phi already contains the seeds of all three dimensions. How? Time potential. Phi can vary in a sequence-like way. It has the capacity for before and after patterns. This does not mean time exists yet. It means the concept of sequence is built into phi's structure. Space potential. Phi can vary across coexistence-like directions. It has the capacity for here and there patterns. Again, not actual space, but the concept of coexistence. Motion potential. Phi can have patterns that link sequence and coexistence. It has the capacity for changing position patterns. Not actual motion, but the concept of transformation. Think of a blank movie screen before the film starts. The screen has temporal potential. It can show sequences of images. The screen has spatial potential. Each image can have spatial patterns. The screen has motion potential. The sequence can show things moving. The screen itself is not showing anything yet, but its very nature, flat, rectangular, light reflective, determines what kinds of movies can be shown on it. A spherical screen would show different kinds of movies. A screen that only reflects red light would show different movies again. Phi's nature, being a function to a circle, determines what kinds of movies, what kinds of universes can be shown or instantiated. Where does pure potential sit in our master tree? It is the root. It is phi itself, before any branches grow. The master tree shows derivatives branching from phi. But phi, as pure potential, is what exists before those branches. It is the seed from which the entire tree can grow. Think of an acorn. An acorn is not an oak tree, but it contains within it the potential to become an oak tree. Roots, trunk, branches, leaves, all of it. Under the right conditions, soil, water, sunlight, that potential unfolds into actuality. Phi, as pure potential, is the acorn of reality. It contains within its mathematical structure the potential for omega branches, temporal patterns, K branches, spatial patterns, all the way up to the infinite canopy of the full derivative tower. From phi as pure potential emerge all the concepts we have already explored. Omega emerges when we ask, how does phi change if we move in a sequence-like direction? This question only makes sense because phi can change. The potential for variation implies the possibility of measuring that variation. K emerges when we ask, how does phi change if we move in a coexistence-like direction? Again, this presumes phi can have different values in different places, a possibility built into phi as a function. Direct change emerges when we consider changes in both directions simultaneously. V emerges from the relationship between omega and K, from the way temporal and spatial change cooperate. All of these, our entire alphabet, emerge from phi's fundamental property. It can vary. Not that it does vary in any particular way, that it can. This is like saying because paper can be marked, writing is possible. Because air can vibrate, sound is possible. Because strings can oscillate, music is possible. Phi's capacity for variation is the foundation of everything that follows. What work does pure potential do in reality's story? It enables. It makes possible. It provides the stage. Without phi as pure potential, there would be no variations, no differences, no patterns. There would be no events, no structures, no flows. There would simply be nothing that could ever count as a story. Pure potential is what allows reality to have a story at all. It is the necessary precondition for narrative. To have a conversation, you need language. But before you can have language, you need the capacity for symbolic representation, the ability for one thing to stand for another. That capacity exists even if no one is speaking. Phi as pure potential is reality's capacity for symbolic representation of patterns. It is the fact that the universe can encode complex information in its structure even before it encodes any particular information. Now we come to a crucial question. How do we test this idea? How could it be falsifying? The claim that phi is pure potential means this. Everything physical must be expressible as differences in phi. This gives us a falsifiability condition. If we find any aspect of physics that cannot be written as differences in phi, then phi is not a truly universal potential. Let me give concrete examples of what would falsify this. First scenario. We discover a fundamental effect whose behavior depends on absolute phi values and not just differences. For instance, if some measurable quantity changed when we added a constant to phi everywhere, that would break the only differences matter principle. Second scenario, we find physical effects that require something outside the phi derivative structure. For example, if some robust phenomenon needed a mechanism that could not be expressed through phi and its derivatives, even in principle, that would be a challenge. Third scenario, we prove mathematically that certain observed patterns cannot arise from any phi function at all, no matter how cleverly we choose it. These are conceptual falsification gates. They are different from experimental falsifications that test specific models. They test the framework itself. If you want to see the full mathematical formulation of these falsifiability conditions, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo. There you will find the scientific papers that this audio journey is built on, including rigorous treatments of when phi can and cannot represent physical structures. Let us make this concrete with examples at different scales. At the quantum scale, the famous wave-particle duality of quantum mechanics emerges from phi's capacity to have both wave-like variations, smooth changes, and particle-like singularities, defects where phi is undefined. The potential for both patterns exists in phi structure before quantum mechanics is implemented. At the biological scale, the incredible complexity of living organisms, cells differentiating, organs forming, organisms growing, all emerges from phi's capacity for hierarchical pattern formation. The fact that simple rules, expressed as derivative relationships, can generate immense complexity is built into phi's mathematical nature. At the cosmological scale, the large-scale structure of the universe, galaxies, clusters, the cosmic web, emerges from Phi's capacity to have variations at vastly different scales simultaneously. The potential for fractal-like structure, patterns within patterns, exists in the infinite derivative tree. At the human scale, our thoughts, emotions, and social structures all emerge from Phi's capacity to encode incredibly complex, dynamic patterns. The fact that billions of neurons can create rich inner experience is not magic. It is Phi's potential for complex organization being realized. In each case, what is remarkable is not that these things exist, but that they can exist within a single, coherent framework. Phi as pure potential is what makes this coherence possible. Let me offer some human-scale analogies to help recognize this concept of pure potential. A blank canvas. Before the painter touches brush to canvas, the canvas holds all possible paintings. It is not empty of meaning, it is full of potential meaning. Every great painting that could be painted exists as possibility in that blank canvas. Silence before music. In a concert hall, before the performance, there is silence. But it is not dead silence. It is potentially full of all the music that could be played. The acoustics of the hall, the instruments waiting, these define what kinds of music can sound beautiful here. An untold story. Before a writer writes the first word, the story exists in potential form. All possible plots, characters, and themes are all somehow contained in the writer's imagination and in the language they will use. In each case, the potential is real but not actual. It defines what can happen, not what does happen. Here is a practical skill you can develop. Look at any phenomenon and ask, what does this imply about what was possible? When you see a tree, do not just see a tree. See the potential for treeness that was realized. The seed contained the potential for exactly this pattern of branching, leafing, and growing, but also for variations, a slightly different shape, size, or arrangement. When you hear a melody, hear not just the notes played, but the potential melodies that were not played but could have been, within the same musical scale and structure. When you watch a conversation, notice not just what is said, but the potential conversations that could have occurred with the same people, the same language, the same context. This is seeing Phi's potential through its actualizations. Every actual thing shows you something about what was possible. Phi as pure potential is the totality of what is possible within reality's grammatical rules. As we end this exploration, remember this. We have not introduced anything new. We are still talking about Phi. We are just focusing on a particular aspect of Phi, its nature as possibility ground. Everything we have discussed, the blank page, the silent alphabet, the capacity for difference, these are all ways of understanding what Phi is in its essence. Not a thing, not a substance, not some invisible material. Instead, it is the possibility of things, substances, patterns, and stories. Before we leave the metaphor of the blank page, let us linger with it a little longer, because it captures something subtle but very important about Phi as pure potential. If you watch a child with a fresh notebook, there is a special feeling in that first untouched page. The child may hesitate before writing, sensing that once the first line is drawn, some possibilities are chosen and others are excluded. A dragon drawn in the top corner is one story. A careful list of dreams for the year is another story. The same page could carry either, but not both at once in the same place. The untouched page feels rich, precisely because nothing has yet been committed. Phi as pure potential is like that first page, held just before the first stroke of the pen. It is the moment where all worlds are equally unspoken. Notice how, in that moment, time, space, and motion are present only as possibilities. Time is present as the possibility of a sequence of sentences, one after another down the page. Space is present as the possibility of layout, margins, spacing, little diagrams in the corner. Motion is present as the possibility of the hand moving, of ideas flowing from mind to paper. None of these are actual yet, but the page is ready for all of them. In the same way, phi as pure potential is not yet time, not yet space, not yet motion. It is the readiness for all three to appear the instant variation begins. We can also think of phi as potential in terms of listening. Imagine you put on noise cancelling headphones in a quiet room. All external sounds fade away. At first, it feels like nothing. But if you pay attention, you notice that this quiet has a kind of tension in it. You are ready to hear something. If a single note were played or a single word spoken, it would stand out very clearly against that silence. The silence is not absence, it is a prepared background that would make any sound immediately meaningful. Phi in its potential state is like that deep, charged silence. It is the background that would make any ripple, any oscillation, any pattern of change instantly stand out. To connect this more directly to the dimensional echoes, imagine that on this silent background, a simple rhythm begins, like a drum playing a steady beat. That drum beat is a time echo of phi. It is phi choosing to vary in a simple, repeating way along the sequence axis. Next, imagine that across a stadium, different sections of the audience begin to clap at slightly different times, creating waves of sound moving through space. That pattern of who claps where is a space echo of phi. Finally, imagine a dancer moving through the crowd, their motion responding to both the drum and the clapping. The dancer's path is a motion echo of phi, weaving together the temporal rhythm and spatial distribution. All of this is possible only because there was first a shared silence, a shared potential for sound and movement. Phi as pure potential is that shared underlying readiness. It is helpful too to think about tools that remain unused. A carpenter's workshop at night is full of tools: saws, hammers, chisels, planes. Each tool has a very specific way it can shape wood. Yet, when the workshop is empty, nothing is being built. The tools do not vanish, their capacities remain. There is a whole world of possible tables, chairs, instruments, and toys sleeping inside those tools. Phi is like the complete set of tools for reality. The derivatives are like the basic moves those tools can make: cutting, smoothing, joining. But phi as pure potential is the fact that there is such a toolbox at all, even before any particular object is crafted. This also gives us another angle on falsifiability. When we say that everything physical must be expressible as differences in phi, we are saying that the entire workshop of reality uses only this one set of tools. If we one day find a phenomenon that seems to require a completely different kind of tool, one that cannot be built as a combination of phi and its derivatives, then we would have discovered the limit to our picture. That would not be a failure. It would be a discovery that there is more to the workshop than we thought. Real science is not afraid of such discoveries. In fact, it lives for them. Think about how you might actually test the idea of phi as pure potential in practical terms, even if you never write down an equation. You could look for patterns in very different systems and ask, can I see these as differences and rates of change of some underlying quantity? For example, you might look at temperature patterns in the ocean, traffic flow in a city, or the rise and fall of certain words on social media. In each case, you might model what is happening as something spreading, concentrating, or oscillating. If the same language of gradients, flows, and oscillations keeps working, that is a sign that an underlying phi-like description is powerful and unifying. On the other hand, if you find a domain where no matter how you try, you cannot express the behavior in terms of some continuous underlying quantity and its changes, that is a warning light. Maybe that domain requires a different kind of basic object. Maybe reality there is not well described by smooth fields at all. Holophase does not insist that everything must fit no matter what. It offers a clear, testable proposal. Try to describe as much as possible as patterns in one cyclic field and its derivatives, and see how far that carries you. From a scientific point of view, this perspective also encourages humility. When we build models of the world, we are like storytellers, sketching particular narratives that fit the data we have seen. The space of possible models, possible phi structures, is much larger than the one we currently use. Recognizing phi as pure potential reminds us that our favorite equations and diagrams are not the whole story. They are chapters in an ever expanding book. Finally, it is worth noting that phi as pure potential is not an excuse to say anything goes. The potential is structured. Just as a language allows many sentences, but not every random string of sounds, phi allows many patterns, but not every imaginable pattern. The rules of how derivatives relate, the requirement that only differences matter, and the constraint that the field lives on a circle, all of these shape the space of what is genuinely possible. In later parts of this episode, we will explore those rules more carefully. For now, it is enough to know that possibility here is not chaos. It is a vast but ordered field of options. Zooming out, remember that everything we have talked about is still just one field, phi, and its derivatives, the single language the universe uses to write every story. In Episode 8, we are examining this language in its pure abstract form, before it writes any particular story. With this part, we have understood phi as the silent alphabet, the blank page, the pure potential from which all actuality emerges. In our next part, we will begin exploring the letters that emerge when this potential starts actualizing, when the blank page receives its first marks. We will examine derivatives as pure symbols, answering questions about how phi changes, before those answers get physical interpretations like frequency or wavelength. For now, look at the world around you with new eyes. See not just what is, but what could have been. See the tapestry of actuality, woven from the loom of possibility. And know that this possibility, this pure potential, has a name, a structure, and a beautiful, coherent logic. Phi is the silent alphabet. The universe is the story being spelled. And you are both reader and writer, character and author, pattern and potential, all at once. Salam, and peace be upon you.